Max Payne 3, released by Rockstar in 2012, presents us with a protagonist who embodies the very essence of failure. Max Payne, once a local legend, has devolved into a mere shadow of his former self in the 9 years since the events of the previous game. The game's opening narration initially paints a deceptively hopeful picture. Max speaks of new beginnings and moving on from the grief that has held him captive for so long. However, this facade quickly crumbles, revealing the harsh reality of Max's existence. A quick run to the liquor store for his daily dose of
Scotch. I never mix my drinks.
Coupled with a heart-wrenching scene of him both throwing and weeping over a picture of his deceased family, exposes the truth. Max's journey towards a fresh start is far from simple. At the core of Max's troubles lies his addictions. The constant numbing of his pain through the ill-advised combination of painkillers and alcohol directly leads to all his subsequent failures. This self-destructive behavior forms the foundation of what we might call Max's cardinal sin. In this analysis, we will explore how one significant mistake can cascade into a series of failures that come to define a person. We'll examine how Max starts this game as a broken, cynical, and listless man, trapped in a cycle of self-loathing and substance abuse. But more than just cataloging Max's shortcomings, we'll explore what these events reveal about the nature of failure itself. Through Max's journey, we'll uncover insights into how addiction, past trauma, and an inability to adapt can conspire to keep a person locked in a pattern of repeated mistakes. As we progress through the key events of Max Payne 3, we'll see not just a man falling from grace, but also the gradual, painful process of redemption. This journey will offer us a nuanced understanding of what truly makes a failure, and more importantly, what it takes to overcome it. We are first introduced to this cycle of failure in the very first mission of the game, where we are treated to a scene of a rooftop party, filled with all sorts of vapid socialites and the mega-rich of Sao Paulo, Brazil, all of whom try to ignore the sight of the sprawling favela below them. Max's day drinking is interrupted by his partner, one Raul Passos, who spends a little time showing our protagonist around. It's here that we're introduced to most of the characters in the game, the most important to Max being Rodrigo Branco and his wife, Fabiana. We also meet Rodrigo's brothers, Victor and Marcelo. However, Max seemingly cares very little for his charges. No sooner than they've been introduced, Max's attention returns to his scotch, only to have a group of balaclava-clad men enter from an elevator. These men storm the party, hold both Max and Passos at gunpoint, kidnap Rodrigo and Fabiana, and attempt to make their escape. This signals the first effect that Max's addictions have on him. He's simply not paying attention to what's going on around him, content to be directed by others and succumb to his own self-loathing. But this kidnapping, for the moment, brings life back into Max, and he springs into action. He works his way through several of the assailants, until eventually he catches up to the ones who kidnapped Fabiana. Pulling off a daring stunt, he manages to free Fabiana and meet back up with Passos, who then points him in the direction of Rodrigo. Max then single-handedly clears out the parking garage the gang was escaping through, and frees Rodrigo mere moments before he was driven away. This near miss encapsulates the cycle Max finds himself in. He indulges his vices, which leads to him messing things up and getting into dangerous situations, which then results in a bout of self-loathing, which inevitably leads to him making even more mistakes. We see the next step in this cycle when, instead of hunkering down under the maximum possible security, Fabiana decides to take her sister, Giovanna, and Marcelo to a nightclub to party all their worries away. While I doubt Max could have done anything to convince the Broncos to stay home, you'd expect him to be on high alert only a few days after a nearly successful kidnapping attempt. Instead, he goes on a diatribe about how he doesn't belong here while downing a couple of glasses of liquor.
Look at me, I'm standing in a nightclub, listening to music I can't stand. I'm 5,000 miles from home, I'm armed and I'm drinking. You don't want to listen to advice from me, amigo.
During this moment of pitiful self-reflection, the kidnappers once again don their ski masks and surround Fabiana and Giovanna on the dance floor. To Max's credit, when he finally realizes the danger, he doesn't hesitate to launch himself into harm's way. Unfortunately, it's too little too late, as the girls are already being ferried to the rooftop. He attempts to catch up to the kidnappers by jumping onto a window washer platform and then onto a nearby helicopter piloted by his partner, Raul Passos. His ability to perform such daring feats while intoxicated suggests that, were he sober, he might be truly formidable.
Yeah, what were you drinking? Bet your ass I was.
Despite his heroics, Fabiana is flown away by the gang, but Max is indeed able to save Giovanna, though she was not one of his charges. This mission essentially acts as the inciting incident for much of the game, where Max and Passos must now try to get Fabiana back from the gang. The fiasco at the stadium begins when Max volunteers both himself and Passos to deliver the ransom money, hoping to make amends for his previous failure. The gang members, who we now know to be called the Commando Sombra, come in very hostile, demanding the $3 million ransom at gunpoint, and they don't bring Fabiana with them or even provide any proof that she's still alive. The exchange is violently interrupted by the well-equipped Crasha Preto militia. Max is shot in the arm by a sniper, and everyone scatters into the stadium.
It was hardly a textbook hostage exchange.
In the ensuing chaos, Max tries to safeguard a Commando Sombra member who has the ransom money. However, he's overwhelmed by the militia forces. Despite his efforts, the Commando Sombra member is executed. Before dying, he reveals Fabiana's location, setting up another rescue attempt. This failure is particularly significant as it demonstrates how even when Max tries to do the right thing, forces beyond his control conspire against him. Max's response to this failure is to overindulge once again in whiskey and painkillers, lamenting his inability to keep Fabiana safe while, ironically, engaging in the very behavior that led to her loss. This cycle of failure and substance abuse continues throughout the game, with Max repeatedly turning to alcohol and pills to cope with his mistakes. Following the information gained at the stadium, Max and Passos attempt to infiltrate the Commando Sombra base to rescue Fabiana. Initially, Max has some success with a stealthy approach. However, the sheer number of guards eventually forces him into a loud shootout. During this chaotic battle, the gang manages to move Fabiana to the docks. This leads to a frantic water chase, with Max and Passos in pursuit. Despite their best efforts and the elimination of numerous Commando Sombra members, they're ultimately thwarted when their boat sustains too much damage to continue. Max is forced to watch helplessly as Fabiana is taken away once again. This sequence of events is crucial as it shows Max's determination and skill, but also the overwhelming odds he faces. It's a failure that comes despite his best efforts, further cementing his feeling that he's fighting a losing battle. Perhaps the most devastating failure for Max is his inability to prevent Rodrigo Branco's assassination. The Crasha Preto assault Branco's office building, seemingly in an attempt to kill him. On top of that, the lockdown security system doesn't seem to be activating. Max and an inexperienced security guard go out into the occupied building in order to try and fix the issue. He resets the security system and clears the building of Crasha Preto members, seemingly addressing all potential threats. However, when Max returns to Rodrigo's office, he finds him shot dead. Adding insult to injury, Max barely escapes a bomb planted in the office, emphasizing how thoroughly he was outmaneuvered. He makes his way out of the burning building, finding the corpse of the young security guard. Eventually, he comes across a heavily wounded Crusher Prado member, who reveals that they were not there to kill Rodrigo, but Max.
Why did you come to kill Rodrigo Bronco?
We came to kill you! Because of what you did to us! You killed so many of us!
He also reveals that Fabiana is being kept in the nearby favela. This failure shakes Max to his core, as it occurs despite his best efforts to be vigilant and proactive. He also believes he is to blame for the Crusher Prado attacking the building in the first place. The assassination of Rodrigo represents a turning point in the narrative. It's the failure that finally pushes Max to attempt a significant change. He quits drinking, shaves his head, and redoubles his efforts to find Fabiana. This moment marks the beginning of Max's progression towards redemption, showing that even at his lowest point, there's still a part of him that wants to do the right thing. This physical and mental reset marks the beginning of Max's effort to reclaim control over his life. However, despite his newfound purpose, his first steps are more of a hangover-induced stumble. He strides into the Nova Esperanza favela, where he believes that Fabiana is being held by the Comando Sombra. His plan to wander into the Nova Esperanza favela with no real strategy leads him to being tricked by a child, robbed, and literally thrown into the gutter. This scene serves as an apt metaphor for Max's overall situation. He's hit rock bottom, both literally and figuratively.
These kids were raised hating clowns like me. Middle-income ass-kickers who protected the rich by shooting kids like them.
Max works his way through the favela, having a suspiciously coincidental meeting with one Wilson De Silva, a police officer in Sao Paulo. De Silva informs Max of the goings-on around town, highlighting that Max has been working for some bad people. De Silva then points him in the direction of Fabiana, saying that she's up the hill. As Max makes his way up, he sees that both Giovanna and Marcelo have made their own ill-fated effort to save Fabiana, which only leads to them being held captive as well. Max bursts into the room in a reckless attempt to save Fabiana, Marcelo, and Giovanna, only to then be captured himself, which then prompts the leader of the Comando Sombra to execute Fabiana. This showcases how Max's impulsive actions often lead to more harm than good. These failures highlight the difficulty of overcoming addiction and changing ingrained behaviors. Max's road to redemption is not a straight path, but a series of stumbles and setbacks. After his failure to save Fabiana, there is a timely raid of the favela by the UFE, a sort of privatized police force, which prompts the Comando Sombra to force both Giovanna and Marcelo out of the room. It also gives Max an opportunity to escape.
That's right, I may be a moron, but here's the thing. I ain't quite as dumb as I seem.
As he works his way through the favela, we see the UFE gathering random civilians from the area and carting them away, which includes both Giovanna and Marcelo. We also see the UFE trading some of these captives with the Crusher Prado. Following the Crusher Prado group, we find both Marcelo and Giovanna under a state of duress. They're begging the militia for mercy, with Marcelo being trapped inside a set of stacked tires and having gasoline poured on him. Before Max has a chance to act, Marcelo is set alight, marking the second of 3 Bronco's brothers' deaths. Fortunately, Max does have time to save Giovanna, and after killing a Crusher Prado officer in a QuickTime event, they make their escape from the favela. Amidst all these failures, we see glimpses of the old Max starting to resurface. Him successfully saving Giovanna after Marcelo's horrific death marks a turning point. For the first time, Max successfully protects someone, igniting a spark of his former self. This moment of success, however small, begins to shift Max's trajectory. It serves as a reminder that redemption is often a gradual process, built on small victories rather than grand gestures. Unfortunately, Max's first victory is not rewarded, but he is instead betrayed by Passos, who abandons him after he risked his own life to protect Giovanna. Had this been the Max from earlier in the game, we would then see him return to another bender, but not anymore. Wilson Da Silva saves Max after his abandonment by Passos. He also spells out for Max that he was always intended to be a patsy for Victor Branco to eliminate his family and inherit its fortune.
What about me?
You. You're the fall guy. The American. Running around, acting like the action hero. Killing lots of people. You're a stroke of genius.
This shows us another consequence of Max's failures, that he, a former NYPD detective, couldn't see the conspiracy forming around him, even when it directly involved him. Da Silva helps Max find a new purpose when he directs him to the Grand Imperial Hotel, where those taken from the Nova Esperanza favela were last seen. Max discovers in his infiltration that the kidnapped people are having their organs harvested. The revelation of the organ harvesting operation serves as an accelerant for Max's redemption. Confronted with such blatant evil, Max finds a cause greater than himself to fight for. This discovery gives Max something to focus on beyond his own pain and failures. His decision to destroy the entire building housing the operation shows a return to his former sense of justice and a willingness to take decisive action against corruption. During the destruction of the hotel, Max is held up at gunpoint by the leader of the Crusha Prado, the ones who have been running the operation at the hotel. Just before Max is unceremoniously executed, Passos returns to save him and help him escape from the hotel, explaining that he was forced into the plot to make Max into a patsy, and only left him behind to protect Giovanna, who is pregnant with his child. Max meets this with empathy and wishes both Passos and Giovanna good luck as they flee Brazil to start a new life together. Finally, Max sets his sights on the UFE run by a man named Becker and Victor Branco, the architect of all the misfortune in this game. With Da Silva's help, he infiltrates the UFE base under the guise of turning himself in. This shows a difference from the Max of the earlier game, as he has some semblance of a plan going in, though it still keeps his trademark recklessness. Da Silva orchestrates a prison break at the same time, which helps to split the attention of the UFE. Max works his way through the base and eventually manages to confront Becker in his office.
Becker!
Something funny about dying?
Unfortunately, he manages to escape with the help of Victor Branco, and Max must chase them to the airport.
God damn it!
Max shoots his way through the occupied airport and manages to catch up to the two conspirators. Before he can get them both, Victor's plane pulls out of the hangar and Max has a final battle with Becker, who then gets blown to smithereens. It's at this moment where Max realizes that they were right to pick him as the patsy, as his moral compass had eroded long ago.
I wouldn't know right from wrong if one of them was helping the poor and the other was banging my sister.
Da Silva then pulls up to the hangar, telling Max that there is still a chance to stop Victor's plane from escaping. They manage to shoot the plane's engines out and find Victor, alive but injured, in the wreckage. Max's final confrontations with Becker and Victor Branco represent the culmination of his journey. Despite the overwhelming odds, Max perseveres, systematically dismantling the corrupt UFE and exposing the far-reaching conspiracy. His decision to spare Victor's life at Da Silva's urging shows growth, a willingness to let justice take its course rather than seeking personal vengeance. This moment demonstrates how far Max has come from the impulsive, self-destructive man we met at the beginning of the game. Now, at the end of it all, we have the answer to our question: what makes a failure? At its core, failure is not merely a series of unfortunate events or mistakes, but rather a complex interplay of personal flaws, external circumstances, and the inability to adapt or grow. The cornerstone of Max's failures lie in his addiction. His reliance on alcohol and painkillers, described earlier as his cardinal sin, serves as a catalyst for his downward spiral. This addiction clouds his judgment, dulls his once sharp instincts, and leaves him vulnerable in situations where his full faculties are desperately needed. It's a vivid reminder that our vices can become the architects of our downfall. But addiction alone does not define failure. Max's inability to let go of his past grief anchors him to a place of perpetual suffering. This emotional stagnation prevents him from moving forward, keeping him trapped in a cycle of self-destruction. It's a poignant demonstration of how our past, if we let it, can become a prison that prevents us from seizing the opportunities of the present and future. Max's journey also highlights how failure can be a cascade of events, each misstep leading to another in a relentless domino effect. His lack of attention due to substance abuse leads to missed opportunities to prevent disaster. These failures, in turn, feed his self-loathing, which drives him further into the arms of his addictions. It's a vicious cycle that illustrates how failure, left unchecked, can become self-perpetuating. However, Max's story isn't just about personal flaws. It also sheds light on how external factors, often beyond our control, can contribute to our failures. Even when Max tries to do the right thing, forces beyond his influence conspire against him. This aspect of his journey reminds us that failure isn't always a result of personal shortcomings, but can sometimes be the product of circumstances we could never have anticipated or prevented. Perhaps most tellingly, Max's initial failures stem from his inability to see the bigger picture. Despite his background as a detective, he fails to recognize the conspiracy forming around him. This blindness to the larger context of his situation serves as a metaphor for how our narrow focus on our immediate problems can prevent us from understanding and addressing the root causes of our failures. Yet, Max's story is not one of unremitting failure. His gradual climb towards redemption offers valuable insights into how one can break the cycle. It begins with acknowledgement. Max's decision to quit drinking and shave his head symbolizes his recognition of the need for change. This is followed by finding a purpose greater than himself, as seen in his determination to expose the organ harvesting operation and bring down the corrupt UFE. The path to overcoming failure, as demonstrated by Max, is not a smooth one. It's filled with setbacks and new challenges. However, what sets his journey apart is his perseverance in the face of these obstacles. Instead of retreating into his old habits, Max pushes forwards, learning from his mistakes and adapting his approach. In essence, what truly makes a failure is not the act of falling down, but the refusal or inability to get back up. It's the persistence of destructive habits, the unwillingness to learn and adapt, and the choice to remain mired in past mistakes rather than striving for growth and change. Max Payne's journey shows us that while we might not always be able to control the circumstances that lead to our failures, we always have the power to choose how we respond to them. Ultimately, the antidote to failure lies in our capacity for resilience, our willingness to learn and adapt, and our ability to find purpose even in our darkest moments. It's about recognizing that redemption and success are not instant transformations, but gradual processes built on small victories and a steadfast commitment to change. In this light, failure is not an endpoint, but a potential turning point, an opportunity for growth, learning, and eventual triumph over our own worst tendencies.